Great. Thank you so much, Jean d'Arc, and welcome to everyone. This is LD177 from Model Creation to Presentation. It is co-authored by myself, Owen Murray, and Alexis Pantos. I am OMM Photography. I currently contract to the Epigraphic Survey as their senior digital photographer. Alexis Pantos is a freelance archaeological photographer, most recently with the Western Wadis of the Theban Necropolis project, and he holds a Master Science in International Heritage Visualization, is really the one responsible behind some of the code you're going to see today and making it all available to you too. This wouldn't have been done without the blessings of director Ray Johnson or written material from assistant director Brett McLean, not to mention valuable insights, conversations, and contributions from senior digital artist Christian Vertesh and epigrapher Ariel Singer. Just in case there's any technical difficulties, in the chat I've put in a post on digital epigraphy. This entire presentation, including speaking the talking head bit now, will be available there. So if you run into any issues, it's all there. All right, let's take it away. So the Chicago House method is rooted in an epigraphic tradition where attention to detail and the expertise of artists, photographers, and Egyptologists work together to form the foundation of the documentation process. The result is precise, accurate, information-rich facsimile drawings that would be unobtainable if any of those disciplines didn't contribute. This presentation is about the survey's first ever digital native prototype, so that's LD177 that you can see that just popped up on the left. And it explores how the rapidly evolving field of digital 3D publishing can work hand in hand with print publication to further the aims of the project. So this is very preliminary work adapting for-print 2D data that is 3D derived for online 3D presentation. All right, a little history really quickly. Many of you may know this, I'm just gonna blast through it. So the founder of the Epigraphic Survey was James Henry Breasted. His early fieldwork in Egypt identified that many copies of hieroglyphic inscriptions made during the 19th century by some of the pioneers of Egyptology were inaccurate. And this was further compounded by the fact that some of the same inscriptions were rapidly deteriorating and at risk of becoming lost forever. Photography promised a solution, but Breasted saw through the illusion and realized that even the best crafted photos were subject to limitations like single directional lighting or multi-directional lighting. Just in case anyone thinks that's not a problem, this is LD177 with ambient light, so it's just what's available. This is it lit up from the top left with a studio strobe raking light, so I'll just flip between the two. All right. So this is just to say that single directional lighting is always going to be a concern, even if you're putting it in PBR after the effect. Until we have RTI-like technology in a 3D model, it's always going to be an issue. And for those of you who know what I'm talking about right there, yes, we're thinking on it and trying to work towards a solution that way too. So even photography's greatest strength, objective impartiality, was itself a weakness because it places equal emphasis on all surface elements. So we're looking at a negative here from some of the early days of Chicago House back in the early 30s. What carried meaning and could be selected and highlighted by careful study in the field: damaged hieroglyphs, eroded internal details of signs or figures, traces of earlier decorative stages, or faded paint lines remain pretty much invisible in a photo. So an Egyptologist's observation and interpretation was needed to highlight historically significant features while downplaying distracting elements such as damage or discoloration. And this would all be delivered through a high-quality facsimile line drawing in which inscribed and or painted elements were given priority. And this in turn required the skills of an artist trained in scientific illustration to lay down the details with enough care and accuracy as to provide a true representation of the inscription. So photography would provide accurate proportions and scale, and Egyptologists' philological knowledge and inspection would reveal historic significance, and the artist's hand would set forth these observations for posterity, the fruits of their combined labor acts of scholarship, art, and conservation combined. In 1924, at the inception of the Epigraphic Survey project, Breasted pioneered this solution, and as you all know, it's come to become known as the Chicago House method. All right, since then, in the 97 years that have gone since then, the disciplines and interactions that underpin the Chicago House method have remained bedrock, especially a series of checks and discussions in situ. As Assistant Director Brett McLean emphasizes, in order to extract and record the maximum amount of information from an ancient decorated wall surface, there is no substitute for taking time to make multiple examinations of the wall with multiple correlations of the copy against the original. And here you can see what just popped up is senior digital artist Christian Vertesch with epigrapher Dr. Jonathan Winnerman going through that process with LD177 on site. So with this guiding principle in mind, the technical elements of the Chicago House method can and have been modified for various field conditions and types of inscribed relief. I make the argument that the internet and various digital technologies and tool sets that accompany it are probably one of the most permanent field condition shifts since the arrival of the daguerreotype for Egyptology, at least in 1839. So it's a massive sort of shift, and of course we're going to adapt to it. Since 2014, the survey has worked on configuring a digital epigraphic workflow from start to finish that conforms to the guiding principle just mentioned, and the focus of expanding digital epigraphy, developing a digital collation process, which was just presented by Ariel Singer. Hopefully you all had a chance to attend that. So LD177, Amun-Re establishes Amenhotep III's double crown, is the first scene to have passed through the digital epigraphic workflow from photogrammetric capture and rectified orthomosaic image through digital tablet drawing, inking, collation, artist, and director checks. It's the first digital native. And this is just showing you here where it's located within the Imperial Cult Chamber at Luxor Temple. So you can see exactly where we're dealing with. So how did it happen? How did we go about it? Pretty standard stuff. Photogrammetry was used for the 3D model. A series of 4 coded targets placed in 4 corners, which were measured and recorded. We put in an X-ray color checker for color calibration in post and used the studio strobe set up outside of the scene in order to provide raking light from the top left as per convention. And then it was shot with a medium format RZ67 Pro 2D 50mm lens and a Hasselblad digital back. That's a bunch of technical jargon, but please don't be intimidated. You can do this with your iPhone. Getting the sync with the strobe might be a little tricky, but there are many, many ways to light up a scene. So it's definitely doable with the tool sets that are available and at hand. The images were shot handheld from a distance of 1.5 meters from the wall. So, if you're using something like an iPhone, you might have to go a lot closer in order to get the same quality, but that is what it is. From the set of 29 photos, 12 were structural. You can see those highlighted in red on the outside, taken at oblique angles to the scene, while the remaining 17 facing or textural photos were shot perpendicular to the scene. The photos were then imported into AgiSoft PhotoScan, which is now Metashape, and a high-resolution TIFF at 0.0845 millimeters a pixel was extracted from the model. This is a ridiculous millimeter to pixel ratio, but it's needed because that's what delivers a 1:4 at 1200 pixel per inch file that was the requirement for the drawing enlargement. So just to give you a sense of what that is, you can see the red area highlighted there. So this is 100% on screen. It was realized this was a little overkill, so that ratio now has changed to 1:4 at 400 pixels per inch, and this makes it a lot easier to handle the material on an iPad in the field. Christian Vertesch then penciled and inked LD177 according to the digital epigraphy guidelines, and the scene passed through all the stages of the epigraphic workflow detailed in Ariel's presentation. The final director-checked illustration was re-imported to the Metashape field model and aligned and reprojected using the same 4 targets that were used for the initial measurements and scale bars. The texture was built once using the original set of 29 photos that you can see here, and then this is the kicker. So keeping the same UV mapping space once using only the single finished illustration, which just popped up on the right there. The field model was exported for publication as is in an OBJ format, resulting in a publication-ready model with 2 textures, 1 photo, 1 illustration, both in the same UV space. So, creating the publication model. Capture 3D data is increasingly common, but the publication can still remain problematic. Self-hosting with technologies like 3D Hop or Poetry are just 2 of many, many platforms, but by far the most prominent platform at the moment is Sketchfab. The standard viewer has its limitations, but the service provides an API to allow customized viewers within a self-hosted HTML page. So many pre-made viewers known as configurators are available, and those are targeted towards e-commerce. That's what Sketchfab is really pushing. None of them, however, offered what we wanted, which was the ability to fade between two textures, the facsimile illustration to the photographic data and back again as wished for any viewer. So to achieve this, we trialed two approaches. The first allowed swapping textures live, but this approach came with a significant performance cost. So instead, we took advantage of Sketchfab's physically based render, so their PBR settings, and we hid the final inked illustration in the emission channel. And then all we did was create a slider to toggle this channel. So let's take a peek. All right, I'm gonna zoom through. So the results have been more than encouraging and provide a way of transitioning between photo texture and final illustration while enabling a deeper scrutiny between the two, so you can move all around. I mean, this is all exploratory in nature, but the results have helped us think through the process and provide grounds for further discussions. Great thing about Sketchfab is you can use annotation features, so you can include a bunch of different comments that would traditionally go with a print publication. Those can be included too. And the viewer can set whatever opacity level they want, being able to go between the two. You can also take advantage of some of Sketchfab's model inspector settings, turn on the wireframe mesh. So in areas where there's recarving, like you're looking at right there, you can understand the three-dimensionality of what is essentially a flat surface and some of the interpretation, the reason those decisions were made and how it's been interpreted. So this model represents a very thin slice of just one 3D publishing platform from just one small area of Egyptological inquiry that can be used to disseminate, educate, and inform. In framing its usefulness and its potential, or lack thereof, we asked, what is the value add of digital publications for Egyptology in general? By no means definitive. We've come up with a few responses. In practical terms, two different streams of digital publications have been identified. The first is digital editions, the second is digital natives. So digital editions would reproduce a traditional publication in a digital way, maintaining the original level of quality, if not increasing it, making it accessible online and offline through data caching and downloadability. It would allow for a better quality reproduction in general, zoomable images, side-by-side comparisons, annotation features, etc. There are various platforms out there already that support standards-based heritage data sharing, such as IIF images, annotations, and servers. Many of them are open source, such as Project Mirador, as well as the Getty Conservation ARCES platform. And by adopting existing tool sets such as these, it's only going to encourage and reinforce data sharing standards and accessibility. It's worth stating that the majority of digital PDFs available at the moment are not considered digital publications by the definitions of our work group. They're accessible on the web, but most are the equivalent of a black and white photocopy with a level of quality that reflects as much. That said, it's also worth stating unequivocally that nothing will ever replace a traditional paper-bound volume held in one's hands and read in person. These publications are and will remain invaluable in and of themselves, if for nothing else than grounding us in the physical realm shared by all, not to mention as fail-safes against data corruption, inaccessibility, host issues, server failure, and all those sort of problems that can come along with the digital spectrum. But it's clear the value adds with digital editions in terms of communication, dissemination of knowledge are cost, scope, accessibility, and better control of the publication process versus traditional book publication houses. Lower production and overhead costs, better quality reproduction, even in downloadable formats with links and references that can be constantly updated, alongside clickable footnotes, all tied into a DUI, a digital object index number, would all be of real benefit. So, and perhaps the last value add kind of lies in what we've all been through over the past year. That can be a source of resiliency. So in times when libraries are closed, digital updates and the sites that host them can foster and support the Egyptological community, allowing research, reference, and interactions to continue virtually. Very similar to this conference that's being held right now. So the second stream of digital publication encompasses a terrain much more vast and not nearly so well defined, and that's digital natives. So 3D capture has become an integral part of what was traditionally a 2D workflow, but this 2D output can now be reunited with the 3D data it's based on with relative ease, right? This 3D data in turn opens up myriad avenues for publication, but not without limitation. So the impartiality of photography, noted by Breasted nearly 100 years ago, remains much the same with structure from motion documentation techniques such as photogrammetry today. The illusion of reality in these mediums, combined with a mindset that approaches them as being a one-stop documentation solution, has in many ways only compounded, as the illusion is now moved into the third dimension. In other words, it's more elusive. So this model right here, it's really important to recognize it's just two 8K textures draped over what is a very sparse mesh. It's an incredibly handy aid. It's part of a 3D publication solution, but it's not a solution in and of itself. The question we really have to contend with is, we want to be virtually real or really virtual? And as far as this goes, we'd rather be really virtual with facsimile line drawings than virtually real. Okay? One will forever chase its tail, trying to be more real, however that gets defined. The other, the facsimile line drawing, is an iterative act of interpretation and a synthesis of knowledge. So, to be clear, digital natives are really exciting, but with limitations. This is from Archeo3D. It's the website of Alban Bryce Pimple. And it's rather topical because it deals, he's dealing with the lost golden city of late. Using open source images published online, he created a point cloud model which helps visualize the lost golden city. And it's fantastic. I highly encourage you to go and check it out. It's Archeo3D if you haven't already, especially for just being able to understand and kind of get a glimpse at the serpentine walls. It's wonderful. That said, at the end of the day, when you really get into the nuts and bolts, it's just a bunch of points, right? It's a phenomenal aid, not a full publication solution in and of itself. And I'm sure that along with Alban Bryce people, we're all looking forward to seeing more from the site, how it's honored, published, made accessible, contributing to the work of Robichaud and Verreille in the 1930s, not to mention Holscher, and an overall collective body of knowledge and research about this area. You know, in order to set a course for 3D publication, not succumb to the illusion of reality, and sidestep the many kind of Pandora-esque possibilities that are out there, it's worth evaluating how these possibilities fit with the original aims and vision of James Henry Breasted and the Chicago House method. You can read about that here. Essentially, it was, you know, to provide a published volume that could stand in place of the original or section thereof, making these ancient records widely available for scholarly research and preserving them for the future. Anyone who's picked up a large print folio of a Chicago House publication will realize the quality and attention to detail that goes into these publications and their inherent value. Though the publications might benefit from a digital edition in order to complement the physical print volume and the quality that's held within that, it's self-evident that the print volumes do justice to the aims and efforts of the original mandate. Not only are facsimile line drawings beautifully rendered, they contain within a synthesis of photographic precision, rendering accurate proportions, as well as clarifying what is undetectable without rigorous inspection in the field, followed by a series of conversations between subject matter experts after the fact, not to mention research into parallels these specialized philologists, many of you, have completed beforehand. So they stand unparalleled in the field precisely because of these elements. It's the time, dedication, knowledge, and craft that's been poured into them that makes them valuable. So we believe the driving question at the core of further and future 3D publication should be, what can 3D publication provide that traditional 2D publications cannot? And one can understand that within this framework, LD177 is just the tip of the iceberg, right? It affords an exciting possibility into conveying contextual relationships of inscriptions within monuments that are apparent in person, perhaps only after repeated or extensive visits, but that simply cannot or are otherwise incredibly difficult to communicate to either academic or layman audiences via traditional print publication. So to wrap it all up, we're excited by the possibilities of digital publications falling into the two main streams of digital editions and digital natives, and see these as worthwhile pursuits in tandem with traditional print publications. Really quickly, at the moment, there's a lot of talk about virtual and augmented realities and what it means to have 3D models that don't require researchers to be in the field. And this in turn raises some difficult concepts and questions that aren't going to disappear and that are worth talking about. So the pressures to adapt to this type of documentation are only going to increase as machine learning algorithms and AI technologies become more prevalent. It could well be that AI produces results that mimic what the survey produces aesthetically. But it's also clear that without the knowledge of a specialized philologist with access to the original, This type of documentation is going to be a pale comparison. As breasted, adapted, and blended techniques, so will we, using technology to augment our perceptions and extend our abilities to see even more than we can at the current moment, but never replacing our faculties and ability to think, perceive the nature of, and engage in our shared reality. The question really is, how do we use technology in the service of narrative rather than to become an avatar for reality? I know I've run out of time here. I'll be done really quick. So part of the reason we value ancient Egyptian artifacts and monuments is because of the beauty, craft, and ingenuity of how they were made. They stand a testament to a mindset of a wider civilization that never ceases to pique our curiosity in all facets of life, spanning thousands of years, not just royal processions, but the day-to-day activities of the workers and craftspeople whom work tirelessly to produce these very objects and monuments that we investigate to this day. These monuments can be seen themselves as an act of publication, read and interrogated as a book. And in turn, in writing ourselves into the record, we want to inject the same beauty, craft, and ingenuity into what we leave. Indeed, we must, if these are going to one day stand in place of the original. The beauty of the epigraphic documentation that Chicago House provides and has provided for the past 97 years is not limited to aesthetics per se. It's a blend of artistry underpinned by scientific methods of observation and recording that in turn forms a visual repository for the knowledge of the craftsmen and scholars involved. This vessel becomes an emissary from the past through the present to the future. It's a very thin, multidisciplinary line. So the Egyptological community's publication efforts present and perpetuate ancient Egypt, but they also represent the present. And by producing something that future generations may in turn want to preserve, we're not only saving something of ancient Egypt, we're saving a piece of ourselves and hopefully the discipline in general. So I'm going to leave that there and wrap that up. Stop the share. And
we have 2 questions that are up already.
Sure.
Any further questions for Owen, if you go to the launch chat section of the Open Water ARCE annual meeting page, you can ask questions there as well. But please put your questions in the chat.
There we go. Great. Let me see this question. Metashape requires a lot of computing power. Do you plug your images into Metashape on a computer in Egypt, or do you wait until you are stateside? No, you'll actually be fascinated to understand that the computer that's doing all the heavy lifting right now is in Luxor at Chicago House. I run it remotely. And yeah, all of what you were seeing in the presentation there was done in Egypt. But we're at a point now where it doesn't really matter where the physical location is, as long as you've got a connection that's strong enough, you can handle the data back and forth. Question, can you talk a little bit more about the process in Metashape for aligning the final line drawing within the 3D model? Okay, great. Yes, so what I just showed you really, really relies on using coded targets because those are the exact same targets that are used to map the illustration back into that model. And if you have those coded targets in whatever you're producing, it doesn't matter whether it's conservation or whatever type of interpretation, that's what allows it to go back into the model with accuracy and precision, so you get an exact overlay. So those sort of things are important. They're not, it's like, if you don't have them, it's not the end of the world. I don't know whether any of you would have seen the presentation I gave last year, but when you're dealing with archival images, if you don't have targets, then you need to find points that you can identify in one set of photographs that you can then identify in another set of photographs. And that would be the same for whatever sort of data you're putting out that you want as another layer. Do you have a list of various sites and URLs I've mentioned that you could share? Yes, all of this presentation, including this presentation that I just gave, will be in the digital epigraphy post. So let me just put that into the chat one more time.